Hi everyone, welcome back to Skywatch Media News. This is the final week of June 2017. Have you heard the latest news from the scientific community? Astrophysicists from the University of Arizona have compelling evidence which suggests that a planetary object with a Mars to Earth mass is most likely lurking in the solar system. This object would be much closer than the so-called Planet 9, which is still awaiting confirmation from astronomers. The orbital body has given away its presence by observations which show that it is presently controlling the orbital plane of the Kuiper Belt in the outer regions of our solar system. The Kuiper Belt lies beyond the orbit of Neptune, where a host of icy bodies and dwarf planets dwell. So the unseen mass would have to be equivalent to the mass of Mars or Earth to be capable of warping the orbital plane of the outer solar system. According to calculations, an object with the mass of Mars or Earth orbiting roughly 60 AU from the Sun, or an orbit that is tilted by 8 degrees to the plane of the known planets, would have the required gravitational influence to warp the orbital plane of the outer solar system. An AU in astronomical terms is the equivalent of approximately 95 million miles, the distance from the Earth to the Sun. So take 60 and multiply it by the 95 million, and you can see just how many miles from the Sun we are talking about here. And yet this object has the capability of warping the orbital plane of the belt for as far as 10 AU on either side. And then we are talking about something quite extraordinary here. We continue to get information in bits and pieces from the scientific community pertaining to new discoveries in our solar system. Every few months we get announcements from NASA and other space organizations that new planets and star systems have been discovered in our backyard. If there is something of significant importance to tell the world, then the disclosure must be slow and precise as a means to get out in front of the story before it becomes too obvious to the watchful eye. For decades, the public has been told that there is nothing out there. There is no Planet X or any other rogue planet that exists in our solar system. That is what they told us, and they made sure that the media reported in the same manner. But everything has changed now. They can no longer control what is happening. As things become more obvious to the public, then the truth can no longer be kept in the dark. So expect more announcements from NASA very soon, as things are really getting serious. They know it, we know it, and time has a way of revealing all things. There is a lot of anticipation for the big event that will happen later this summer. On August 21st, a major solar eclipse will pass over half of the planet. But the interesting details of this particular eclipse is that the path of its totality will bring total darkness to only one country, the United States. Solar eclipses have long been considered as harbingers of disasters for the Gentile nations. For those of you who follow the words of Scripture, this particular passage may hold great meaning in correlation to the upcoming eclipse. Now, I am not an interpreter of the spoken word, but if you study these words carefully, you may notice that the timing of this passage appears to be quite concise. So what is the correlation between this passage of Scripture and the major solar eclipse of 2017? There is something unprecedented and extraordinary that will take place on August 21st. When the sun rises on this date in the United States, it will do so in total darkness. So that you may understand, the sun will be totally dark when it rises above the horizon on that date. This event would then relate to the ending verses of the passage in Isaiah, an exact correlation if the event happens as anticipated. If this scripture holds any meaning to you, then this eclipse would have to be the one that occurs prior to the actual day of the Lord, which will happen during the Feast of Trumpets in September. It cannot be interpreted any other way. Now, if anyone has any doubts about the significance of this solar event, then take a look at how this event will play out. This map indicates the precise route of this major summer event. As you can see, it will cross over the heartland of the United States from the northwest to the southeast. The focus of this event will be squarely over the United States, which makes this an exceptionally rare occurrence in historical terms for this country. The total eclipse of 2017 will be visible from a narrow corridor, which makes the eclipse even more interesting, as you can see here. The path of the August eclipse crosses the path of the upcoming eclipse of April 2024, which is almost 7 years to the date. Does the number 7 sound familiar to you? It is the time of the day of the Lord as described in the book of Revelation. These two eclipses are therefore placing a huge emphasis on the United States. So stay tuned, folks. There are some interesting times ahead of us. If you spend time searching the internet on the subject of Planet X, you're bound to come upon a number of essays and articles that explain a possible catastrophe scenario caused by extraterrestrial sources, such as a Planet 9 or a large brown dwarf planet, which is basically a failed star. There have been several scientific studies floating around that are attempting to find evidence of its existence beyond Neptune. But since scientists remain in disagreement on whether the planet actually exists, the matter hasn't garnered much attention lately. So the theory of a Planet 9 may have gone silent in the short term, but the notion that something is out there lurking in our solar system is still very much alive. After all, something is affecting the entire solar system and potentially threatening our planet. And so an explanation must be forthcoming. It is very likely that scientists have been playing a game of deceit when they talk about Planet 9. Depending on who is conducting the study, the planet is either very real and it is creating a warp pull in the solar system, or it is still a hypothetical planet. So how can both be true? How many times have we heard critics say that if the planet were on a collision course with Earth, it would be seen by now? And yet these same people have never been able to rule out the likelihood of its existence. Here is an interesting statistic that you may not be aware of. According to the Stern Review on the Economics of Climate Change, a report which was conducted for the British government in 2006, people are 5 times more likely to perish in an extinction-level event than by any other means known to man. Therefore, the risk of human extinction due to a major calamity, whether that be man-made, natural, or extraterrestrial, could be much higher than anyone would have ever imagined. Every year there is a higher risk of a supervolcano erupting or an asteroid strike on the planet. Both would be devastating at ground zero, but they would also kick up dust into the atmosphere, blocking sunlight and causing global temperatures to plunge. But these are not the only risks that we are facing. What about a genetically engineered pandemic or geoengineering gone awry? Statistical models are showing, whether we agree with them or not, that the planet could see an extraterrestrial event in the form of a hazardous near-Earth object in our lifetime. Now, these models also mention calamities caused by a rogue planet, like Nibiru or Planet X. As I mentioned at the beginning, something very odd is going on beyond Pluto. Astronomers have known for decades that something exists at the outer edge of the solar system in the vicinity of the Kuiper Belt. But unlike most of the planets and asteroids which orbit between Mars and Jupiter, there are a handful of objects which have weird orbits, which we call elongated paths around the Sun. It's possible that we are being programmed for the apocalyptic catastrophe in our future. All of this death obsession and disaster that we speak of may be part of the galactic cycle, the cycle of life that includes death. When the consciousness becomes aware of this, we begin to see the Earth change and global catastrophes occur. Take a look around you. This is exactly what is happening now. On the flip side, we have learned that while catastrophes of the extinction level have come and gone, life always has a way of coming back to the planet. The story of catastrophe and regeneration is part of complexity theory, and we realize the Earth is in constant renewal. From chaos comes order and the replenishment of the Earth. What is written in the book of the Apocalypse is the cyclical nature of our existence and the cyclical appearance of Nemesis and Planet X. Astronomers say that an encounter with Nemesis will alter the magnetic polarity of the Sun, will cause massive solar flares, and create earthquakes that will move the axis of the Earth. But scientists say that we should not be worried, as it appears that Nemesis has escaped the gravitational pull of our Sun and has wandered far away into the Milky Way galaxy, never to be found again. Or will it? Something is causing significant changes on our planet. According to the American Meteorite Society, since 2005, Earth has seen an increase in asteroid activity of over 800%. Since January, there have been more near misses of large asteroids that cross between the Earth and the Moon than at any other time on record. Extinction models such as the Stern Review include the possibility of a Nemesis or Planet X cataclysm here on Earth. Can anyone explain why this is so? There is also the oddity of all the talk about Kepler planets being discovered.
Greetings, this is Indian in the Machine, transmitting this message from Peru. I wanted to talk a little bit about the big earthquake to come. And I was reading Phoenix Journal number 36. And some of the earthquake information is scattered throughout many of the Phoenix journals. So sometimes you just gotta read the journals and don't expect to be spoon-fed all of your nourishment in one journal. So in Phoenix Journal number 36, they basically talked about the San Andreas fault line being kind of like a cog and having catching and locking into place, if you will, the tectonic plates with one another. And also it's mentioned that the powers that used to be, who have been controlling and manipulating our planet, have been very busy trying to loosen those cogs so that the whole thing basically is going to go. Perhaps this puts all that fracking along the fault lines into context for everyone. And I found it was interesting that when California basically falls into the Pacific Ocean during the big one, which will be 10 to 12 points, and actually let's say a series of big ones, because pretty sure there isn't going to be just one. And this is going to happen very quickly. And the journals say 15 minutes. So, that's quite stark. So, when you feel the earth start to rumble, if you're in California, and you basically have 15 minutes to somehow get yourself out of the area. And that would include trying to do so while all the roads in front of you and around you are basically not even perhaps usable. I think if you're perceiving that somehow the highways are going to stay clear and all the traffic is going to move smoothly so that you can make your quick getaway, well, if you bought land in California, at this point, you'll pretty much believe anything. And so we compare that scenario with the Louisiana Salt Dome scenario that is in the midst of collapsing right now. And many of us have been watching that for well over a year now. And that scenario has more of a timeline to it. And in fact, people are kind of just asleep on that one because they just think it's just a little pond that's growing. And they don't envision that as the salt dome collapses, basically the entire state of Louisiana is going to fall into the Gulf of Mexico. And then we have the situation on the other side of the Pacific Ocean with Japan. And Japan is basically on the edge of a huge trench. And many geologists also are saying basically Japan's going to be falling into the ocean too. So there are other triggers as well. And my point being is that you're not going to necessarily know which one. But if it is the California one, don't expect that the warning is going to be sufficient to get a person to safety. That doesn't mean that everyone in California is going to perish or anything like that, but I would say pretty much the majority. And some of the future maps of America seem to highlight the new islands of California. So if you're one of the fortunate ones to not prepare, and I don't even think those islands are going to be basically safe because you're going to have tidal waves to deal with. So my message is we're coming down to crunch time with these pending earth changes, and whatever triggers this series of earth changes to come, we don't know. But the time to prepare is now. And if I could add a little tidbit, when people may have the question, well, what do I do to prepare? Well, everything is coming to one big convergence. We're not only dealing with earthquakes, we're dealing with volcanoes, we're dealing with fireballs, we're dealing with a pending pole shift, we're dealing with Nibiru in our solar system, we're dealing with a shift of basically everything. So if you want to prepare, basically you got to turn to God and quit turning your back to God and saying, God, show me proof that you exist so that I can turn to you. Because that's pretty much not how it works. And then when you are able to turn to God and stand in God's presence without cowering away, then you were able to perceive your guidance. But let me tell you this, that the governments of Russia and Japan have built underground shelters for all of their citizens. This is mentioned a few times in the Phoenix journals. And most people in America are content to watch their TVs in their plastic and wooden houses. And let me tell you, you're not going to want to be in one of those when the fireballs begin to rain down from Nibiru. And if you think that the stuff of fireballs and Nibiru is just a big conspiracy, well, let me say that we've got the bending of our magnetosphere very recently. We've got fireball season, apparently, now, a new term coined by NASA. But what they fail to really be upfront about is where those fireballs are coming from. We've also got a new layer of our radiation belt around our planet. We basically have scores of scientists who are either silent, or they're in on it, or they're trying to tell us the truth and are having a challenge finding an audience. And so, to prepare physically may require basically $300 worth of materials and digging a hole in the ground and covering it with basically earth. If you remember the time of Noah, that was a cleansing by water. This time, we're being cleansed by fire. And so we don't have to dig an ark. We basically need to dig a hole and cover it with earth. And this message will find you with very few days to do so. And it's not like this message hasn't been it's not like this message hasn't been available, because even the Phoenix journals have been available for a long time. 26 years they've been coming out.